Hey everybody, Joel, importsauce.com. I just wanted to do a quick video and show everybody what we did for our Volvo P1 S40 battery relocation. Stick around and we'll show you some of the important things that you need to know if you're attempting this yourself. Okay, so battery relocation, we don't need to go over why you would want to do it or any of those things. If you are looking to do one, then you've already done that research. What we want to do today is just show you two main things, really the placement and securing the battery into the trunk, as well as the wiring and how we did that. That should help you out. So I'm going to go ahead and flip the camera around so that we can take a look, and let's start off with placement and securing. So what we're looking at is the factory battery box. You will know that this is typically in the engine bay on the driver's side, right next to the strut shock tower. Has the cover here. Underneath that is the actual battery box. So if you haven't taken it out, sometimes depending on jobs that you're doing, you may need to pull this off we had this out for the M66 swap. But essentially it is just the box, right? And the box has three screws, bolts, that will hold it. 1, 2, and 3. That will hold that to the transmission mount. So the top two on the transmission mount, and then the back, there is a little bracket. We'll see that when we get up to the wiring portion here in a bit. So what we did is we went to the junkyard and we just grabbed another one of these. That way we could do this process over the course, so we didn't have to pull the battery out. We could, work it and not lose the car for any extended amount of time. So essentially what we did is we used the factory battery box. Why not? It is the perfect size for the battery, and it already has the mounting holes. So what we did is we came back, let me get this out of the way here. Came back, and what we did is just started off by cutting out a portion of the carpet there that it's going to fit over in that corner. So we pulled this out. We're still going to do some fine-tooth trimming on it. And then also we pulled out pieces of this foam. This typically wraps all the way around, and we just cut out the portion where the battery box is going to stay. From there, we went ahead and the box fits in there, and we went underneath and made sure that we could drill some holes. So the same 3 factory holes that hold the battery box in the engine compartment, we went ahead and drilled those down through the chunk, and it actually went down to the frame of the car, so it's going to be nice and secure. We then secured those not with just standard bolts, but we got the bolts with locking washers and spacing washers underneath the vehicle. So now the box is firmly attached. There's no movement, there's no play, anything of that nature on there. So we can see there. And then once we clean this up, it's going to just sit, it's almost flush in there. So that's a pretty good placement, and that's typically where most people are putting it. It's going to be back on the passenger, all the way back, just for the weight option, or to do that. So next we'll go ahead and look at the wiring, and I'll show you a few things that we did there as well. Okay, for wiring, we had the factory battery has 2 connections that come off the positive, 2 connections that come off the negative to ground. So we're going to show you what we did there. We can take a look, and what we did is we did a distribution box here. So we have the wire here that goes positive off to the starter, and then we have the other one which goes into the fuse box there. So normally those were both attached onto the factory battery positive terminal there. And so what we did is we shortened those. We're still going to get some new shrink wrap and clean those up, but we went ahead and just left those. We didn't have to extend anything because they were already going right here anyways. The 2 negatives that came off of the negative terminal are going to be one that again went directly to the chassis. We went ahead and just used the same thread pitch that was used on the battery box, and those were the two mounts for it there. And then we just used the same, and we grounded right there instead of to the battery. The other one that came off of the negative went up to the top shock tower here, so we'll show you what we did there. Essentially for the grounds, as we saw here, we went ahead and grounded the one that went to the battery, and the one that went to the shock tower, we went ahead and ran it all the way back to the trunk, and we'll take a look and see what we did there. So the transmission mount was perfect because it already had the holes, and all we had to do was just go ahead and get some new bolts to thread those right in. In terms of the power supply, let's work backwards now. So we have the power distribution box, and we have 4 terminals in there, so we can add more if we had to. And then what I wanted was a quick release, or a quick disconnect, which we added in line here. And that is because when you're working on the car, disconnect the battery if you're going to work on this or that. And so it's real easy just to flip the switch on that. We don't have to go to the trunk. We don't have to mess around with anything. If we're working, just half a second, boop, and it's off. Wiring up here, we didn't change anything. We used all the existing ground and power, but to run, we did a 0 gauge oxygen-free copper, so OFC. We had messed around with initially we had ran some 4 gauge, some 2 gauge, and we were noticing the starter was a little slow on that. So we figured for the distance, which was about 18 feet, after trying 3 different ones, we settled on this. It was expensive, but in the long run, it would have been cheaper if I would have just bought it instead of buying all these other. I got CCA 0 gauge, which is the copper coated aluminum or copper clad aluminum, which is typically speaker wire, stuff like that. It still didn't have the transmission power that this thing did. So with that, we have our ground and our power. I'm going to show you how we ran that. But again, the ground here, they come together, and then this ground is going to attach directly to the battery in the back as well. That way everything on the ground ties in to the chassis here. You'll see how we tied it into the chassis in the trunk and to the battery. So, well, we just ran those along, went through the firewall hole there, and then since we have the interior out, we can show you, right? So it popped out there. We ran it down. With the seats and the carpet out, we were able to run through the holes in the side chassis braces. Right, it comes up, it goes back. We pulled all this out, and we pulled all of the foam and everything out of the trunk so that it would essentially run at the lowest point that it could. Out of the way. Now we get back to the trunk. See, it's down underneath here. It comes up, and we also wanted some short protection, so we went with a 300 amp. This is a quick reset circuit. So if I needed to do something back here, I want to mess with the battery, wanted to kill juice, simply just hit the trigger. It's going to shut everything off. And that way, I mean, we're not anticipating any safety issues with the shorts, but you know, just to do it right, put that in line there. And then up here, we have the factory terminal that was used, where the 2 up in the engine bay, the alternator, or I'm sorry, the starter and the fuse box, and then we just ran it so it came through there right into here. We made a little plastic cover out of some extra battery stuff that we had, just so that when this is here, we don't have any exposed metal in case anything's bouncing around in the trunk. Next, we look at the ground. So the ground here comes off, and in the standard setup under the engine bay, we can see that there was 2. One, which was this one, had gone to the chassis, down to the chassis, down to the transmission, and the other one that was cut went to the engine, the shock tower there. So if you remember up front, we had that other ground that we said we were running all the way to the back. Last thing we got to do is, here it is we're just going to get a double and get that back in. That way everything is tied into ground. Currently this ground goes through and it mounts to a chassis ground that is behind this carpet. So the last thing we got to do is tie that ground in, and then everything in terms of the circuit goes all the way around with no issue. So that is what we did. hopefully that helps you out. Like I said, it was really easy to have the extra battery box when we started, because we were able to fabricate and cut and measure and get the box mounted first. And then next step, run all the wire. And then lastly, when we were ready, we just moved the battery back and redid a few of the connections, and it was no more than about 30 minutes, an hour of downtime without the vehicle. The whole rest of the time we were able to drive it. So importsauce.com, hope that helps.